All right, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Today is Sunday, May the 30th, 2021, and I just want to say it's great to be back. Before I get into the news, I did want to give an update on what had happened in the past 1.5 to 2 weeks very, very quickly, then we'll jump right into the news. So first off, I just want to say that I appreciate all the feedback you've all been giving regarding my friend Camden. He helps me out a lot on the back end of the show and things like that. Decided to give him an opportunity while I was away. Now, with that being said, for those on Patreon, you pretty much knew all up until basically last night what was going on with my personal life and things like that. Now, I had planned to go away for about a 5-day trip. Okay. And then what ended up happening, because I live in Canada, was before I left, I confirmed multiple times with the Canadian government at multiple levels and the airline as well, too. I was just flying within the country, just from one place in the country to another. And I said, listen, do I have to quarantine when I get there? Because if I had to, I would have prepared more episodes publicly and things like that. Not that it would have mattered if I did, and you'll see why in a second. And they said, no, you don't have to quarantine or anything. I get off the plane. Next thing you know, folks, boom, I get handed a piece of paper saying whether the flight is international or domestic. Too bad, you got to quarantine for 14 days. So I was basically stuck there. Like I said, Patreon members had content. With that being said, though, the other thing about all of this too was that YouTube had banned this show for 7 days because of a particular segment of me and some others questioning the WHO. So even if I had episodes prepared on the public side, then I still wouldn't have been able to put them up. With that being said, though, let's jump right into it. I do want to say I did have a good time. For those that have been asking, thank you. And I do want to say again, I appreciate the feedback you've been giving Camden, but let's jump into it and we'll get right to it. So first off, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and by the way, we're going to be covering global news like crazy. I know there's been a lot. Camden's covered quite a bit. Maybe you guys want to hear my perspective on some things that have been covered in the past, and we'll get to that. So Prime Minister Netanyahu may be gone as the Prime Minister, but he's trying to thwart that still. So his opposition party or opposition coalition, if you will, from my understanding, has until Wednesday to put together a government. Now, the rumor is to put together a new government within Israel. Now, the rumor is that essentially Netanyahu may in fact announce his resignation today or tomorrow, because the very strong word on the street, metaphorically, is that his opposition has actually put together a government when Netanyahu couldn't. Now, with that being said, from my understanding, this Netanyahu has been and is the longest serving prime minister of Israel ever. So look, whether you agree with his policies or not, he had a good run. Like, I mean, it's true, right? Even if he's out, he had a good run. And if he ends up staying in, it just shows that he's able to retain his power through political strategy. Very simple, right? The next thing is that Epstein's guards admitted to falsifying records. Oh, gosh. I mean, as if we didn't see that coming. You know what I mean? So I'm not even going to spend time on that. But it just goes to show the connections and the way things work. Who knows if the guards gave up names of higher ups that paid them off, that, you know, maybe were allegedly Mossad agents or CIA agents, or maybe both, trying to silence Epstein as he was, you know, allegedly murdered, if you will. And who knows, right? Who knows what names they gave, but I doubt it's going to get public after this. I doubt the names that the guards were paid off by will go public, right? Just like Attorney General William Barr apparently saw the Epstein tapes and then all of a sudden he misplaced them, if you will, right? Not trying to say Republican or Democrat, but we got to call things like they are. So maybe there's other reasons as to why Barr didn't release them, if you will, or whatever, or put them in a public domain, but that's a different story. The next thing is that John Cena apologized for saying that Taiwan is a country, and Mark Ruffalo, the actor who plays the Hulk, backtracked on the Israel-Palestine issue as well. So, okay. This just goes to show you the apparatus of the intelligence operations on the back end, as well as the influence that it, I guess you could say, conflates over on the front end, meaning the influence on the intelligence side filters down to the front end. That's just the way things work, right? With that being said, John Cena apologized for saying this because they're filming the next Fast and Furious movie, I believe, in China, or at least certain parts of the film are in China. And again, China does not recognize Taiwan as a country, or at least the CCP doesn't. I'm not saying the people, but the regime at the very least. Maybe some people have those views, maybe they don't. He basically had to backtrack because if you want to film in China, you need the approval of the Chinese Communist Party. So John Cena probably got a call from his agent, and that agent probably got a call from the higher up executive saying, listen, stand down, you got to apologize, you're a main role in this film, so you got to apologize. Just goes to show you the influence is alive and well. It's not for me to tell you folks what you think of Taiwan or not. I personally I see personally myself, Taiwan as a country. Maybe there's some things I'm missing. I'd be more than glad to be filled in within more appropriate context. Now, the next thing is that Mark Ruffalo is a very adamant political tweeter, if you want to call it. And that's fine. He's got the right to voice his opinion. But it just goes to show you, and this is when things get a little bit touchy. So I kind of prepared this mentally in my mind. Mark Ruffalo is an actor in Hollywood, a fairly prominent one at that, right? And he basically said what Israel's doing to Palestine. He didn't say this word for word, but in a handful of tweets, it's basically what he said, that, what Israel's doing to Palestine isn't right and things like that. He then backtracked and then tweeted a couple days ago from the day I'm recording this, which is a Sunday morning, saying, listen, both sides are have casualties, and, it was not right for me to go and attack Israel the way I did. And a lot of people do not want to say this in mainstream media, even independent media. But look, I'm going to say it because this is how the show is. We got to be like this. There is a stereotype and a saying, okay, that I do not like, that says Jews run Hollywood. The problem I have with that is this. Is there heavy Jewish influence at an intelligence level from the Mossad in Hollywood? Absolutely. You take a look at Rose McGowan, who tried to go against Harvey Weinstein, and then Harvey Weinstein hired former Mossad agents to spy on her, things like that. The connections are there. You look at the Epstein connections. Now, you might be saying, Dave, the fact that they're Jewish has nothing to do with it. I would say, folks, yes and no. Why? The Jewish people, like many other cultures, have a very, and I'm not trying to lecture anybody here, but they have a very strong connection with their country, with their land, if you will. It is no secret that there are a lot of Jewish people, as well as CIA and Mossad operatives in Hollywood. This channel, on a public and private level on Patreon, probably has shown that just as much as anybody else, right? And we'll be showing more of that too. With that being said, you can't just say, oh, Jews run Hollywood, because we're not talking about all Jewish people. Now, to give some context, my background is mainly Italian. And actually, I'm a little bit Jewish, actually, but mainly Italian. So it's like saying all Italians are mobsters. It's not true. Just because I have a background, an Italian background, and I have some family that's in construction and things like this, which I actually do, it doesn't actually mean that my family are mobsters and things like that, because you're overgeneralizing. Now, are there certain small subcultures within the Italian community that tend to be criminals, or tend to think criminally, or even become organized criminals, if you will? Yes. And the same concept, we can argue, is for many other cultures, because no culture is perfect, but we can also argue that very strongly within the influence that the Jewish businessmen have on Hollywood. Again, nothing against the Jewish people or the Jewish culture. It's a beautiful culture, great people, just like every other culture in the world, in most cases. It's just reality, folks. It's just that the mainstream media doesn't want to admit it. So I hope I've done a good job in explaining that in the most unbiased way that I can. Again, I've been labeled racist many times for even saying something like this, but if people really try to hear what I'm saying, I think you'll get it. But anyways, the next thing is that President Macron of France threatened to pull his troops out of the country of Mali if the country of Mali, he quotes, and he says, and I quote, lunges towards what he calls radical Islam. Look, it's his opinion. It's his troops. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like an asshole here, but I'm not trying to say at the same time, too, that Mali's leaning towards radical Islam. But if the signs are there, then it's true. This comes down to one thing. Is this part of an internal agenda on Macron's part, or is this something else entirely? And what I mean by that, very simply, is Macron doing this for his own purpose, to push a particular narrative within his own country, or to influence other countries? Because that's when we get on we get more into the intelligence side of things, if you will, and the cultural influence and political, strategical, and military and financial influence. Or is he actually saying that because he's concerned about, radical Islam propping up in Mali? It's hard to say. And I'm not going to sit here and say I know, because I don't know much about Mali at all. So the next thing is that voters are heading to the polls in the country of Cyprus for the Cyprus parliamentary election, and the ultra-nationalist movement is growing there. Now, look, what's interesting about Cyprus is that it's been known amongst other countries such as Switzerland and the Mediterranean to, for very wealthy people to hide their money and or not to hide their money, but just to, not pay taxes and things like that. Sorry, just had my morning coffee. My throat melts a little dry. But anyways, look, if it's, I believe there's about 500,000 people in Cyprus. It's not that big of a country, but again, if it's useful for a financial position, or from a financial position for businessmen or intelligence people or things like this, they'll use it. Look, folks, I will tell you right now, ultimately, from what I'm seeing, I with what's going on in Cyprus, if it's their country, if the people want to vote on a more ultra nationalistic movement, which is that, closing up the borders, not because of the pandemic, but for other reasons, it's their right technically. I mean, people will argue that moving too much to one side or the other of any political view is extreme, right, and not healthy. But again, it is their country. I'm not trying to defend them, but I'm they voted their people in, and that's it. The president, from my understanding of Cyprus, is trying to encourage all citizens of Cyprus to go out and vote, so that certain political influencers don't take over and all that, because a lot of times many countries around the world count on people not even showing up to the polls. So the next thing is that tens of thousands in Brazil are protesting Bolsonaro's moves in every way, shape, and form. Again, you got Lula, who was basically freed of all charges, from my understanding, who is going to challenge Bolsonaro. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know a bunch about the politics there. With that being said, I know that there's a stark divide, from my understanding, at least from the last time I checked and did some research on what's going on in Brazil. But I ultimately believe that you and I will not know the truth unless we speak to the people on the ground there, right? And look, ultimately, the protests are showing people are upset with Bolsonaro. Maybe Lula's going to come in. We'll see what happens. We have to remember, folks, Brazil is a big goddamn country, population size, geographically. They got beautiful, landmarks, if you will, rainforest, all that kind of stuff. So again, there's always going to be protesters. You can't please everybody, right? So the next thing is that Russia, okay, this is interesting. Russia has confirmed, excuse me, a $500 million loan for the country of Belarus, as the Western world has toughened sanctions on Belarus. I'm curious to see how this plays out here. So for those who don't know, I believe Camden covered it, but if you didn't listen or watch, or maybe if you just took some time off from the show or what have you, what happened in Belarus basically, and don't quote me on this, guys, because I should have touched up on this a bit more, but admittedly I've been working on other episodes, but what ended up happening was that there was a journalist that was murdered, from my understanding, or detained, if you will, and then there was also a plane as well, a plane from Belarus that the Belarus government was trying to force its landing and what have you. Now, again, that might be taken out of context. That might not be the full story, but long story short, Canada, United States, the rest of the world basically condemned what was going on in Belarus. Putin comes in and secures a loan for that country. I'm curious to see from a strategical standpoint how this plays out, and the reason for that is because Putin will go with any country that has angered the West. He's trying to get people on his side. Can you honestly blame him? It's a chess game. It's not for me to tell you folks Putin or Russia's bad, or the West is bad, or any other country. It's not for me to say that. Can you blame him from a purely objective strategical viewpoint, taking all emotions out of it? I mean, I can't, right? But again, that's just me. Maybe I'm missing something or what have you. The next thing is that Boris Johnson got married privately, I believe it was yesterday, again, to his fiancée. Boris Johnson's the Prime Minister of the UK. I guess, that's nice. I guess always nice to see. So yeah, the next thing is that the remains of 215 kids were found at a Canadian school. I'm not going to get into that too much right now, because it's going to connect to a lot of other members episodes and things like that. So I'm not really going to delve into that now. On the forefront of it, it's terrible. Any type of human being or creature or living being, let alone young adolescent beings, let alone human children, and that many of them found dead, there's a problem, right? And we'll be touching on a lot of that after, which is why I don't want to delve into it too much, a little bit publicly and then more on Patreon and what have you. Now, the next thing is that there was a hat shop in Nashville, Tennessee that has since deleted their advertisements, but what they were doing was they were selling, I think if it was for a few dollars American, they were selling Gold Star patches if you wanted to wear it to show that you didn't get the vaccine. Okay, I mean, clearly, it doesn't take a Sherlock Holmes to realize that they were selling from my understanding and from the pictures I saw, the exact same stars that the Nazis gave the Jewish people to wear to show that you were a Jew if you were out walking on the street or something like this, right? I don't know what to say to that. I don't know why you'd have to brand yourself like that, if you will. Again, obviously, the fact that it's reminiscent of World War II and the events leading up to that as well. I'm not even going to go any further on that. That's just unfortunate for any culture, for any religion. I mean, I don't know. But again, I guess Look, again, if I want to play both sides and take emotions out of it, if they're a business, maybe they have the right to do that, I would imagine, right? Again, if I'm missing context, please let me know. The next thing is that two were dead and 22 hurt in a Florida club shooting last night or early this morning. 3 people got out of a car and started firing into a crowd. No joke, seriously. 3, like, I'm not even kidding. They just got it. What was interesting about this, and granted, I have not seen any footage, but what was interesting is it's not like they just, it was one person who, as most shootings are, that, has a pistol or has a submachine gun in their jacket or something, and they pull it out and they just start spraying. This looked orchestrated, seemingly. Again, it could be a mass shooting, don't get me wrong. If they just opened fired and blazed out on everybody, then it was a mass shooting. Simple as that. But for 3 people to jump out of a car and just shoot like that, they must all have either some messed up views in their mind or some radical, I don't know. I don't know. Again, if this was targeted, it was a terrible targeted assassination. Not that I'm encouraging that, but again, organized criminals usually do things much more targeted that way, whether it's, the mob, the cartel, or whatever. So I don't know. It's hard to say. The next thing is that NASA has released new images of the Milky Way. Look, they're nice to look at, but it's hard to, I don't know. I'm not going to get into this because, yeah, you all know why. The next thing is that a pregnant woman saved children from drowning in Lake Michigan. I wanted to report this just because it's nice to hear some of these things. We hear so much negativity and someone trying to screw over this person, whether it's politics or more at a ground level. I figured it'd be nice to throw this in. The next thing is that Biden allegedly received funds from certain Russian lobbyists shortly before conceding on not sanctioning the Russian pipeline, and he also made a weird comment. Okay, so for those, before I get to the comment about the girl crossing her legs part, for those who didn't hear about it already, Biden basically said he wasn't going to put more sanctions, or he was not going to be stricter on the Russian pipeline. Again, it's strategy, right? I'm not trying to say Biden is playing 3D chess, but I mean, just like with anything else in life, the Chinese, the Russians, they will use their lobbyists to influence Americans and things like this. Now, this is when it comes down more to in my particular opinion, a cultural or philosophical debate. And the reason why I say that is because I want to bring this up because I feel like it's important. The United States, or the West, even Canada, has always been known to have people that are much more susceptible to money compared to the Chinese people or the Russian people or, other people. And even people in the UK have been more susceptible to being bribed. Let's just call it bribery straight up, right? Whereas the Chinese people are trying to have politicians and people working for the CCP that are more committed to the movement rather than personal financial gain. Right, so there's pros and cons to both opportunistic approaches. With that being said, though, when you use your spies and you use your lobbyists to influence, again, hopefully Biden's been warned in this case. Like, listen, if you let the Colonial Pipeline go, it'll look bad publicly, but we can find out more things on the back end from an intelligence angle. It's a constant strategy, right? So for me to sit here and prop up Biden is not right. To celebrate him, but also to criticize him would not be right in this case, because folks, I gotta say, the more research I do for the Patreon episodes and the main episodes, the more I gotta tell you folks, and that nothing is what it seems. And I don't mean to sound, like Captain Obvious, if you will, but it's just, it's sad when I read an article that I would hope to be a straightforward article, and it just isn't, whether it's coming from the West or anywhere else in the world. The next thing is that Biden made some creepy comments about a girl yesterday, and he said something along the lines of, oh, look at her there looking like she's 19 with her legs crossed and all that. It was pretty creepy, I'm not going to lie. So, yeah, I don't know that was just, I don't know why he goes off script to make those those remarks. It just doesn't look good at all. But I also must admit, too, the Democratic part, at least the networks that are funded or that lean towards the Democratic or the more liberal perspective of things, they never pick it up. So the next thing is that Hunter Biden is under the spotlight again for having his dad sit in on private meetings with Burisma executives. Burisma is a company out of Ukraine, from my understanding, while he was vice president. So while his father was vice president. And okay, this is when it's going to get interesting, because look, is there privilege going on? Absolutely. It's just straight. Whether it's on the left or the right, there's, and when I say privilege, I mean, If you get into politics, all of a sudden your son, your niece, your daughter, whatever, gets a position on a particular board and they've had no experience, and the way they got there was because of your name and because of your influence, right? It's simple. It's just the media is not consistent. They keep talking about the Trump-Russia thing. Don Jr. met with Russians and this and that and what have you. So then what about this? Why, not saying that you have to like say, oh, Biden's a bad guy, but why not just report this neutrally? The same way that you quote unquote neutrally reported the whole Russia thing, right? And I'm saying this in a very serious way towards the mainstream media networks, if you will. On top of that as well, too, Hunter Biden also violated a divorce settlement by not paying delinquent taxes and things like that. But the question becomes this, folks. We can harp on the specifics and, new information can come out, but the question will become this. Will anything happen? That's what it comes down to. Because the system in pure theory, as we all know, is supposed to work as good as it could, right? In the practice of reality. But all Biden's got to do is make a phone call with another phone or through someone else or some. I know it sounds like a drug dealer, but it's the same concept of the way they would communicate if they don't want things to be tracked. Make a phone call and to the Attorney General's office and say, listen, drop this. I mean, it's true. Bill Clinton met with Loretta Lynch on the tarmac. I mean, it's the same idea, right? We can also argue Trump and Attorney General William Barr were very close too, right? So we have to be fair and unbiased and call it the way we see it. The next thing is that Bill Cosby has been denied parole. Yeah, no, I'm sure his lawyers argued, his deteriorating health and things like that. But what he's done to people over the years, no. That guy shouldn't be going anywhere, in my opinion. The next thing is that the Ukrainian ambassador to Thailand died while collapsing on a resort with his family. May he rest in peace. But I also cannot think that this is an intelligence move. Ambassadors get, I don't want to say disappeared, but they get murdered more often than we think. And it always is played off to be natural because it's supposed to look like that on the front end of things, and that's just true. That's just the way it is. So the next thing is that the White House is teaming up with dating apps to try to encourage the vaccine to be taken. I don't know. It tells me something that when the White House has to team up with dating apps, the United States government has to team up with dating apps to try to get people to take the vaccine. I don't know. You all know where I stand on this, or at least most of you do. I don't know. It's hard to say in my humble opinion. It's true. So, again, I hope that you all enjoyed today's episode. Things are back to normal. We have a ton of content coming out for the members and publicly later on today, going into tomorrow, and we'll catch all of you later on. Cheers.